All right, cool. Recording. You good?
Feeling good. Sounds good.
Sounds good. Feeling good. All right. Thank you, Garrett. We try to. I think we reschedule like three times. It always happens. I think almost every single podcast we reschedule twice. So I'm already. Whenever I like send out requests, I always look for like two different dates just in case. So thanks for coming on and thanks for spending this time on pandemic world right now. So
Absolutely. Hey, I've learned a bit about time zones and how they can change. You can have two different time zones at different times of the year in the same state. Colorado.
I thought, yeah, that's so funny. We did you know that before? You were already like had everything in mountain zone or?
No, I knew we were like in mountain time,
Mhm.
but I didn't know that Colorado changes from mountain standard time to daylight standard time, which
Ah,
I believe is an hour different. And then there's part of Arizona does that too.
a
Like
little chunk,
Navajo
right?
Nation does that in Arizona too. So time zones are just so weird, and it's a good thing that things like Google Calendar can. If I remember to set it up that way, then Google
No,
Calendar can.
even the recent email that you sent me, it was in Central Time for some reason, still Chicago. I was like, so
All right. Well, no shout out to Google Calendar then.
yeah. One thing I'm gonna start this very unorthodox. Most of the people will ask you questions about yourself. We'll get to that later. But one of the interesting things that I saw, and it's something that I've studied before too, circular economy. I saw it on your website, and one thing that actually popped up to another unorthodox question, completely out of line. Why don't they allow cities to recycle? Because I saw you had something on your website to
Uh,
circle certain products, right?
so that's with regard to like these small plastics or the
Hmm.
cannabis plastics.
Yeah, yeah,
I guess we'll answer your question in reverse order.
yeah, yeah.
All right. These small plastics. It's not that the dispensaries aren't allowed to recycle them. Um, it's that not all dispensaries have access to programs because they're not always accessible to businesses. Um, and that has to do with the way, I guess, the state supported recycling infrastructure is set up, which is not as accessible to businesses or apartment buildings, like in multifamily homes. So there's that aspect. But the real reason why these little things aren't recyclable is because the systems that the cities use all over the country, more than 90% of the time, use conveyance systems like a conveyor belt, but it's like a bunch of axles that push things along, and they crush glass and they let small things like crushed glass slip through, while larger plastic objects continue down the line to a point where they can get sorted. So it has to do with the sortation methods that are used. The fact that recycling systems are built and continue to be built to capture things like water bottles and things bigger than that. So they literally fall through the cracks when it comes to these. Not sure if I have one nearby, but little pop top cannabis containers
I have
and the
one.
mylar bags and these little things. They fall through the cracks. They go into landfills. 98% of the time if you put them into the blue bin or the green bin or whatever color your recycling bin is where you are.
How did you get to the point to start the company, and where did the idea stem from?
We we started out a few college kids kind of talking about how obviously the recycling system is dysfunctional. Um, the we started learning about plastic in the ocean. I think a friend took me to see a documentary, showed me plastic in the ocean and the suffering that's going on with animals, and just the way that was actually affecting the ecology. And then learning how in also beginning of 2018, there was geopolitical things going on, China banning different classes of recyclables, and other countries cracking down. And I was like, obviously, recycling's not working. And we were talking about the systems and looking into that. And then we saw little groups around the world experimenting with um, with a type of system to reprocess plastics and make new things. So we were thinking a bit about how a viable business model could capture something that's not being captured, um, and produce something. And one day I was uh, in my bedroom, and there was a dresser drawer that I had where I basically put all my cannabis packaging that I didn't know what to do with. Um, and I just thought, like, why am I doing this with this plastic? But I put like a water bottle or a, laundry detergent bottle in the bin. I was like, is this recyclable? So we looked into that and thought, if I have a drawer full, then probably a lot of other people might. Um, so I went to the city, and took a tour of the city systems at the city of Phoenix at the North Gateway transfer station, where they have a materials recovery facility, which is what they usually call like a recycling center.
Mhm.
And that's where they do all that separation and the spinning wheels. We have a little bit of like an Instagram blurb on this. You'll see some machinery in a big space. Saw all that and learned about how all of that works, and asked the guy giving the tour about pill bottles, pharmacy bottles, and I kind of just asked him about that because I didn't exactly want to talk about cannabis at the time. In this conversation, there was enough to talk about. So, um, but he said, yeah, typically anything under 2.5 inches falls through the cracks. 2.5 inches, in some places falls through the cracks, and doesn't get recycled as far as plastics go. So then we just started poking around into asking, just like searching for dispensaries, like seeing if they have recycling programs, and finding out that like both recycling programs were wanted, the dispensaries wanted them, the customers wanted them, and so then it was just a matter of considering how to put together that infrastructure. And I mean, a lot of learning along the way about materials and packaging and like recycling versus composting and different alternatives to plastic cannabis packaging, and weighing that with ourselves and being like, is this the best option? Is there something, is this kind of outdated because we're supporting the use of these single-use plastics? But then you look at pharmacy, these orange bottles from pharmacies, and those have been around for a long time, and I don't think are going away anytime soon. And there are certain economic factors that we spent time with, and certain um, kind of responsible factors that we sat and spent time with. And we decided this made sense. And the market told us that as well, talking to dispensaries and patients. And then it was just a matter of figuring out what to do next and how to make it all work, and what to make.
How did you guys start putting, I don't know, like a sales plan together? Because I'm always curious. I think every single cannabis business is a startup still, and it's just interesting hearing stories. It's just like, did you pick up the phone and call 100 fucking times, like till somebody says yes, and then somebody invites you in, or like, how did you? What was like the first interaction? And when did you know, I guess, that you can fully call somebody, and if they accept that, you can actually do the job?
Mm. So we did a lot of weird, like, experimenting in the background, before we even figured out that like cannabis, as a community and an industry to close the loop in, made sense. So we were getting like our own plastic milk jugs from our houses, and like friends, and I had a college professor who would bring me a bunch of Starbucks cups and yogurt containers and milk jugs and things in a bag. And they're like, "You're using this stuff, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So we built machines in my apartment, um, and we built a machine that shreds, and we built a machine that heats and injects plastic, and spent some time like working with the kind of nitty gritty of melting and injecting and figuring out how to actually make something, because that's what the whole premise of this business model was, is that we were actually going to make something that people want, an end product, that raises the value of this material, um, and shows people that it came directly from something, and it's part of something good. So figuring out how to make something and make it consistently produced, that was a bit of time us spent in the background, a lot of cursing at molds when we crack open a metal mold, and the inside it's like half melted and half not filled in. Um, a lot of that, and then like we made tiny tweaks along the way. It's like every 10 hours we spent screwing up, um, resulted in a 10% improvement in quality, or knowledge about something that we need to fix to create a 10% improvement in efficiency. um, so so we figured the production process out, really before we figured out like what the business model was that was going to make sense working with the plastic coming from the industry, because we had to be able to make something. And when we come to that industry, we have to be able to say, this is what we're going to be doing with it. This is where it's going to go, because recyclers we've seen groups around, who say that they're recycling, or who implement recycling programs, um, but are not recycling, or they're doing a kind of social advocacy thing, but they're putting this material in the recycling bin, which, for reasons we already talked about, is very counterproductive. Um, so we figured out the product and the process a lot on the back end, and then that resulted in this product, um, these little planters. So we're able to make these consistently now. This is 100% pop tops. I should have an example of pop tops um, nearby, but I guess not. So we mixed the colors together intentionally, and then we ended up adding this detail to the bottom. So we have some branding on there. We encourage people to recycle it. We made it in a specific size, so that it is over 2.5 inches in all dimensions, so that if it does go through a recycling system, it is quite likely to reach sorting, and get sorted out. Um, and then we approached the industry, and really, like, it wasn't it wasn't a struggle when it came to talking to dispensaries. We've had more dispensaries reach out to us than we have reached out to. Um, and at the moment, we're only working with one, just because of our own. We're developing products in the background, at the moment. We're developing products and doing a lot of a different kind of background work now that we have the production process up, and we have the connection made with the dispensary, and with that process down, significant improvements made to the recycling bin, which is now, um, it's now sexier. It's it's now more interactive, and more fun, and it tells people more about what's actually going on. So for one, we don't get people's soda bottles or candy wrappers, or what have you. In there, we get number five plastic only, but also people understand where the stuff is going. And hopefully, like, our hope is that people will see, oh, these people are making something out of this. What is that product? Let me go see what it is and engage with it. But also, let me now figure out what is recyclable where I live and how I need to recycle it correctly, or what I need to do so that it will be recycled. Um, and that's a lot of kind of communication that just citizens have not had, um, that I think we can make part of the broader conversation we're having with people while we're doing this.
It's funny that you say that, like educating citizens and just in general. One of the biggest issue, like like looking at the cannabis industry from like a lens of like the whole CBD boom that happened within a few years, you would think that everybody is familiar with hemp, CBD and cannabis, but then when I speak to other business owners in the cannabis industry, it's like, no, like education is still like one of the sub layers that we still have to do like very almost like daily to educate, because it's not a regular thing yet where like you can't. I remember somebody asked me the whole Bitcoin cryptocurrency boom that was going on. Somebody asked me, is like, it's like, you know what internet is, right? You can like you can't define it, but you just know it intuitively. And
Mhm.
when we don't have that yet with cryptocurrency, so we don't have that with cannabis yet as well. But when it comes to people just intuitively know, but you can't describe the internet, right? Like it's Internet of Things. It's like this digital place where things happen, and everybody's gonna give you a different answer, but it's like part of us. And it's
Mhm.
funny that you say that. I wanted to like go back a little bit. With the team that you guys have developed. I saw you guys have a scientist, and then like, what's your background? Where do you come from? Because I saw you're a designer, and when you said that you guys developed a product in your apartment, that's like really fascinating.
Um, yeah, so my background is, I just graduated with a degree in history and political science. Um, so as far as design and engineering, business leadership goes, you can connect the dots clearly there. Um, the uh, the pathway has been circuitous, but honestly, I am. Uh, I have a writing background, so like you'll see that come through in our posts and stuff like that. I do a lot of the communication and marketing, for what we do, and I'm kind of the front man, for helping educate people. Um, but when it comes to design and engineering and building stuff, sort of like I never really considered myself a crafty person, or I never considered myself, mathematical or technical, things like Legos and whatnot growing up, or whatever. But it seems like just like two-thirds or so, through my degree, I just became fascinated by design. Um, and I don't know if that was something I read or what, but there's something that I wanted to invent, and it's an ergonomic, um, kind of assistive device, to create a standing desk anywhere. And that's something I still want to do in the future. But I started designing that out and kind of seeing what that would look like, and looking at different types of hinges, and fueling my brain in that way a little bit, um, and not really planning to do much with it, just kind of fueling the idea a little bit creatively, and then learning a bit about design concepts on my own, um, learning some tools, learning how to use Fusion 360, and like build an idea out in three dimensions. And like I don't call myself an engineer. I'm definitely I have like I work with an industrial design student and a product design student, who have like are pretty close to having science degrees. and are able to really work with the details and sometimes help me immerse the process. But um, I bring, I guess, some creativity, and a passion for products that are beautiful, but also make a seamless difference in your everyday life. Um, Things that, like, when they're not there, you miss them, but you didn't even realize what they were doing when they're around. Um, that excites me, and getting to that process through the iterations of a design is exciting process. So
How did you guys come to the decision to make the plant cups from the recycled? Is that something that was just easy way to test the product, or did you
yeah,
guys see a one from from people, or just got some feedback and you guys we're just gonna go with it?
we we liked the idea. It was something simple. Now, we had never made anything before, so we wanted to try to make something that was fairly promising, simple, but also had utility and had like a long term of utility. And a planter, you pretty much use it until it's broken. Um, and this is something that we can make small. We could make it fairly efficiently. Like, and we played around with a lot of ideas like little phone stands or picture frames and different concepts, but had good reactions to this. And it was initially we did it as a crowdfunding project.
Mm.
So we raised $9,000 so that we could improve machinery, improve process, kind of pay for stuff that's required when trying to venture sometimes, especially trying to manufacture something locally. Anyway, so we did it for a crowdfunding project, and then people just liked it, and we found that there's a market for it locally. So we have it in 6 stores right now. We're working on getting it at ASU because we had good experience with them, and then until the uh, coronavirus issues and the necessity for social distancing removed all of the events. We do pop up events, we do things like farmers markets, and there's generally a good reaction to someone, a group that's locally making stuff with stuff that would have gone into a landfill or potentially an ecosystem, um, and selling cute little air plants as well.
Is that gonna be one of your base products, or are you guys testing something new as well? Or?
Yes, so that was, I'd say, our kind of test product as a company. Um, but we're working on our debut cannabis product right now. And we floated this idea with like different people as we were tabling um, at different events like First Friday, and we were right out in front of the shop Bud's Glass Joint on First Friday. It's like my favorite smoke shop in Arizona, and out there tabling and selling, and we sold out that night. We sold like 30, 35 little planters, just to people who were out like having a good time and looking at other kind of artisan stuff. Um, and so like that was good, and we floated the idea of cannabis products because that just made sense in terms of showing people where their plastic waste is going after they put it in the bin and closing the loop within a community, which is really our goal. So we floated the idea of a rolling tray, like a simple rolling tray, and people liked that idea generally. And then we thought about what isn't in a rolling tray. If you, sorry, you know what a rolling tray is, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So like I've been using cannabis for a while, but I didn't know what a rolling tray was for like until a few months ago. Maybe maybe 6 or 8 months ago, something like that. Um, And then I saw these things around with like artwork on them and stuff. Um, I thought that's I thought that's what textbooks were for rolling. Perfectly fine containment device. But then I got a rolling tray and I was like, this is kind of nice. And I used it for a while because we were thinking about rolling trays. And I looked at the to the corners, and um, then we figured out like we can make a rolling tray do more than just offer a simple like little tray area. We can build in added utility. We can make it stronger than typical rolling trays. Um, we can make it intrinsically prettier in the materials that we use, with this kind of marbling that we try to work with. Um, all the colors are over there, and I don't want to run away from the camera right now. But we we don't have to paint it with any paint that's going to scratch off. So then we started working with designs, 3D printing some iterations, and I have a few uh, I have a few iterations. There's one of them we put our name on it just for funsies, but we worked with the edges, tried to figure that out. There's one thing that we're doing with it that's gonna be really different. That's gonna add the daily that exciting level of daily utility that I want to provide in the experience of a rolling tray. And I notice when people use them, and when I use them, um, you don't always just use a rolling tray for rolling joints or for rolling up. You use it to just break things up, or you use it to like have a flat surface for some material. Maybe if you're using like a two-piece grinder or something, then you want to like empty it out somewhere. Um, and what I noticed myself and some of my friends doing was picking up the rolling tray and tapping it out and tapping the material off of the corner into a bowl or into a paper or whatever. Um, and then I noticed like different devices that could be used to load things, like load cones. There's like cone loading funnels and stuff like that. So I thought we can kind of combine these ideas. We can make a rolling tray that is great in all the ways that I mentioned, but has a system um, built in that helps you tap off the tray, that makes that work, and that helps you fill a cone. So maybe you don't need a cone loader. You just need this tray, and you can do everything with one piece there. Um, so that's our debut cannabis product that we're working on right now.
Can you talk a little bit like the walkthrough process of how you guys gather the material? You said you're working with a dispensary, so is it just somebody that takes a drive, and then what happens after? Do you just bring it back to your apartment and start sorting it out, taking the stickers off? Or, like, what's the full process, and like how long does because you guys make it into 3D printing. What is it called? The wrap, right? As I believe, or no?
Oh no, we don't make it into filament.
Mhm.
No, I'll take you through the process. These are 3D printed prototypes,
Mhm.
so these are not made using our process
Mhm.
yet. Once we get to the final iteration, the design that we want to launch, then we'll be actually building out the mold for that and using that with our recycled plastics to
Mm.
produce on a longer term basis. Um, so these are all just kind of like parts of the process here, building that up. But how our process works, it starts with the pickup, like you mentioned. Um, we go to a dispensary in North Phoenix, bring a small truck or even my little Scion, and pick up the bin. It has a lock on it, and it's HIPAA compliant and stuff. And we switch it out with the new bin, so there's no bags or anything used. And then we bring that back here. Yeah, we will go through sorting, um, sort into different colors as we remove any labels that are not obviously already removed.
Did you develop the bin, or is it just like a standard bin that you guys?
We developed it. We found essentially a shell
Mhm.
of a bin at ASU. At their surplus store, we found some really awesome recycling bins that were the size we needed to be and everything, and very sturdy um, and good looking for I think like $10 each. Um, and then we spent about $150 and a good amount of um, confusing ourselves with Chinese directions about how electronic components are supposed to function, um, and uh, and put the bin together. Got it in front of. We have about 5 people working on the project. Um, Two of us are really like in it invested, and a couple are interns getting like ASU internship credit here at Arizona State University. So we put ideas in front of them and phrases in front of them and see if it makes sense. And so yeah, we developed a bin, and it's has the electronics built in, so it doesn't actually allow you to operate it
Mhm.
until you acknowledge a couple of things about what you're doing with it or what you're about to put in there. Sorry, we
Sorry.
got
Yeah, yeah,
on
we
bin for a
totally.
while, but I was really excited about the bin. So
Yeah, and
um,
actually, let's just keep going on the bin. We'll touch back. You said it has like custom functions, or like what do you mean by that?
right, so we wanted to accomplish a couple of things with the bin, which is to make sure that people only put in the stuff that we're able to recycle, and make sure that it's empty and dry.
Mhm.
Um, any liquids could be a big problem in our process, and if you're like leaving ashes or something, sometimes that happens. So we were improving both of those things. And so to do that, we wanted to have, and okay, so the other thing we wanted to accomplish was becoming HIPAA compliant,
Mhm.
which means after someone, because these are bottles often with medical information on the labeling, we need to make sure that after someone puts it in, it's like you're not able to get it out. It's like
Oh, the U.S. postal.
yes, like a
Yeah.
postal box. Um, uh, yeah, like a mailing box. So the other aspect is you have to have a lock on it, so you can open it up and take stuff out. So we kind of designed that shaping in there. That was all just physical stuff and a lock. And then to accomplish the other two things, the material and the contaminants, um, we had to basically have it inaccessible until people acknowledge at least. And we can't, we we don't exactly have the investment or probably even the expertise right now to put in systems that reject material that is not what we want, or reject material that has contaminants that are not acceptable. Um, those technology, some of that doesn't even exist. Um, so we have to trust people to say, yes, I'm doing this, and then yes, I'm doing this before the bin, the opening of the bin is actually unlocked and accessible. So that's what we did. We put in a couple of switches and some electronics on timers. So there are two timers And the first button, um, well, when you walk up to the bin, it says it has a big recycling logo on the front, and I can actually, if I can swing the camera around, I can show
Yeah, yeah.
you
Go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
similar
Please.
to what it looks like. Um, this is this is really just the shell kind of model of it.
Hmm.
Um, but then we outfitted that with a whole bunch of information and some guidance for people. And so on top, it says, Resonate Recycling Command Center. And there are some like rockets and stars and planets there. Um, and it says, look for the number 5 and stuff like that. So people do that.
What
Um,
I had a
and there
question
are
too.
two
I forgot
buttons
to
that
ask you. What
people
are the
can.
numbers of the recycling? You said number 5. You
Oh, yeah.
mentioned it a few times.
Yeah. The numbers with recycling are, um, they were rolled out in, I'm not going to try to remember the year, but they were rolled out to basically for manufacturers to create a coding system for the types of plastics. There are 7 numbers and hundreds of types of plastics. So, how does that work? Um, the first 6 numbers are specific types or pretty specific. Um, and it goes polyethylene terephthalate, HDPE, PVC, LDPE, polypropylene, number 5, which is what we use, and then polystyrene, that's 1 through 6. And then number 7 is everything else. It's like acrylic and TPU, which is like a synthetic rubber mix, and all kinds of stuff, polyurethane, and bowling balls and football helmets, and like so many different engineering plastics and things that are used that are number 7. So the major piece of information I think that we want to get across to people when it comes to these numbers is that seeing a number on something doesn't mean that it's recyclable, and that unfortunately, I think that's something that goes. I was looking at the bottom of this lighter to see if it had a number on it. Unfortunately, you see a number on things, something as small as like a little concentrate container. If you ever see the types of containers that
Yeah,
concentrate
yeah. I'm gonna look at it
bags,
actually right after this.
you see recycling symbols or an SD card case, recycling symbols on that. Um, and it's, I think, something that some manufacturers or industry people feel good about because they're buying it and it has a triangle on it and things like that. But yeah, that's what it is. It's identifying the type of resin that's used.
Is that required? Or, probably not, right? For certain plastics, or is that some sort of if you're a bigger company, I don't know, like a corporate giant that's making it, is that required for you to have that, or?
I don't believe it's required at all. I've seen uh, many many products that aren't labeled. Sometimes I know what they are because of what they are, and you get to learn how the plastic feels and some of the physical properties to differentiate them, but it's not required. Um, I mine is that if we're regulating certain things, it would be nice if any plastics over a certain weight, a certain like maybe consumer plastic products, or like durable goods products with a certain weight of plastic should have a recycling code or should be marked as not recyclable. Um, but obviously, marking your product as not recyclable, um, or being restricted from putting a certain symbol or number on it because it's not recyclable is something that most industry wouldn't want to be up for.
We kind of pivoted off the conversation, but you were walking through the process of coming
Yeah,
up to the bin and explaining about the bin. So yeah, keep going with that.
it's all good. The bin, when you walk up to it, you have those 2 buttons. The first one um, says, "Is it plastic only?" There's a little bit of that means, and so you press that, and it lights up green. And then button says, "Is it MRI?" And you press that, and it lights up as well. And then you click, and the door to the bin on top then becomes locked, and you're able to put stuff in. And then that relay is on for 60 seconds, and then it locks again. So it's kind of a cyclical process there, and that's what the people see. That's what the patient sees when they go to recycle something. Um, and then hopefully they understand a bit more that this stuff is going somewhere. It's going somewhere locally, doing something good, and then they become a bit more educated about recycling generally. And then we pick up that. If you want to go back toward the
Yeah.
process,
Uh-huh.
uh, when we pick up that plastic, it starts back up with the sortation of color as well as the removal of labels.
Hmm.
So
Is this
that's
done by hand, right? Like you guys do it?
it's largely a hand process. Some of the labels from some dispensaries are very difficult to remove. Um, in time, we plan to work with dispensaries to change the types of labels that they use. We found that they can generally use labels that are the same size and that are more removable, um, but are still secure and often cost less than the dispensary was paying before, um, just from what we've seen. So we delabel. Some labels are hard to remove and require a bit more attention. So we will soak those in a detergent solution and then remove the labels. That becomes more tedious. Um, at least on a small scale, it becomes tedious. And then the next step is to uh, sort of like making a pizza. Before you melt the cheese, you just shred it up into a workable material. And we take this plastic and we shred it up in a machine that results in sort of like flakes on a donut, or like rough gravel, flaked plastic material. And then the next step is to inject to put it into a machine, which is also in my apartment, where we heat, inject, and mold the plastic to make what we make.
How did you guys establish like success metrics in terms of like, all right, this is how much we need to pick up every week in order for the business to be successful in the beginning? Or is there, and then like I think in the beginning stages too, I'm not sure how long you guys been open to, but how did you guys attract people, or did you establish a system to a dispensary to educate the people that hey, you could bring back um, you
Mm-hmm.
could bring back all the containers or
Mm-hmm. So I feel like there was a first part to the question. Like the second one was about like how do we get the word out, basically, and the first question was what?
How did you guys establish like success metrics in terms of like, all right, this is we have to pick up
Oh, right.
20 pounds or something a week, or this is how much we need to collect it in order to prove a point that this is a legible business, or
Yeah.
whatever I guess success metrics in general for you guys.
Oh, indeed. Yeah. Um, yeah, we were uncertain about working with dispensaries in general because we didn't know how much plastic they would bring in. We didn't know if a voluntary kind of recovery process was going to be very successful. So we put out some little bins. They were like basically fish bowls,
Hmm.
um, about the size of a basketball, and it had a little blue sign on it that said "Recycle pharmacy and dispensary bottles here." Um, and we put that at a few coffee shops. And that was the first thing we did to try to see if people would bring back pill containers and dispensary containers, and then see how much we could consistently put them through our process. Um, and that worked out with definitely not a lot of consistency, but it was up and down, good success, I would say. And we got enough material through that we were no longer that we had to tell our friends like, I appreciate you trying to recycle this stuff. Um, you can now put your to-go boxes from the restaurant in your normal recycling bin, provided that you rinse them out. And so we had a steady supply, and then yeah, we didn't know for sure if a dispensary pivoting toward a dispensary would work. We had a small, simple bin in a dispensary called. Can I say like names of companies?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of
Alright.
course, of course. If you, I
Called
mean,
Mission.
if you don't mind it, yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. A Mission dispensary in North Phoenix. They, I believe, reached out to us initially. We said, let's try something, and we said, well, we don't exactly have a bin ready for you yet, and there are certain things we think we need to do. And they said, okay, well, we can try it out. Um, we can try out. I think maybe they were working with a different company before with mixed results or something, but um, they said we can try it out with just a simple bin. The receptionist at the dispensary will manage all of that, so we can have it like under our control. And we ended up with something like 10 pounds per month, or every 3 weeks, of plastic from this dispensary without really communicating it anything, and with a pretty unassuming what looked like a trash can behind the receptionist. And that was, if we run the numbers about what 10 pounds of plastic can be, this little guy is about 2.5 ounces of plastic. So 10 pounds of plastic equals a lot of these. Um, I don't have Siri connectivity right now, so I can't ask it to do math for me. But we did the numbers enough to see that this would make sense. So 10 pounds, um, four of these in a pound, 16, 30, 64, about 64 of these for 10 pounds, if I did that right. Um, and 64, we sell these to wholesalers with little plants in them for $5. So that's 320 bucks, um, something like that. And so yeah, um, we run the numbers on how much labor and energy it takes. We had to get a device that measures kind of the energy we're drawing out of different outlets. Made sure that our process was actually energy efficient, because if it takes more energy to um, produce one of these from recycled plastic than it does from virgin material, um, then we're not necessarily doing a lot of good, or at least that's something to consider. That's one of the factors to consider. Um, so we found out that it requires very little energy, thus very little money, to put material through this process, and most of it comes down to labor in doing it.
How do you guys plan on, I don't know if it's the right question, eliminating labor? Have you guys thought about a system to, I guess, make the process a lot more efficient and simpler?
Yeah, in some ways we are. I think we can have intermediary solutions that are also good, um, until we get to a situation where we have like robotic sortation of specific colors.
Mhm.
Um, right now, we could probably, in my opinion, waste a few $1,000s and get a kind of conveyance system and uh, robotic sortation system to do like a rough color sort and things like that. That's one thing I see coming down the road, but right now, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Um, we have extra time in some cases. Um, and some like self-sacrifice is in the equation there. Um, but we see robotic sortation down the road um, for color. Um, we think in between, we may be working with groups like with people with disabilities or um, people who have like limited access to higher paying jobs. Um, and there's an organization down here called Gompers, which facilitates that. And I'd like to have a conversation with them about parts of our process that may make sense. Um, and maybe that'll change part of the process, allow it to something where I'm not doing it, but someone is doing it, and someone is being well compensated for it, and I don't feel like I'm holding that person back by keeping them peeling labels or sorting colors and things like that all day. Um, so so yeah, that's one area where I see automation changing things.
Can you give us a little bit of education about the circular economy and then the linear and maybe a little bite-sized trends, countries or communities that implemented this, successful implementations before? Just a spiel about it because I'm pretty fascinated by circular economy. When I got into cannabis industry, that's what I exactly imagined in the supply chain of having local communities, especially when it comes to like plastics and that stuff.
Mm, okay. Circular economy is, albeit kind of a utopian concept, that implies a lot of good things happening. Um, so, circular economy is the idea, just to give an overview, it's the idea that the materials we put into a process or a product are intended to be looped into another process or product or back into the same process or product with minimal loss of, I guess, economic and material efficiency, like minimal loss. So in one way, recycling is an attempt at that, um, and it does work in some ways. So like a pretty old school model of that is recycling cans or glass bottles. Um, the I don't know what goes into this, and maybe this is some kind of propaganda, but I have read and heard people say that in Arizona, a glass bottle, if it is recycled, it's generally back on the shelf or it has completed that process in 2 weeks. That's pretty impressive. And if that's accurate, the way that's being described, that's a good example of circular economy. Um, Now, unfortunately, like the way recycling has gone is largely not that. The recycling that we see with plastics pre 2018 largely consisted of taking the plastic bottles and baling them up and putting them on a truck and shipping them to China or another country where they would make them into a recycled plastic pellet, which was usually a lower grade material, downcycling into a plastic that can be used then for like clothing or packaging um, or something of lower value. Um, at least of lower value than would have generally be made with virgin plastics. Um, and in many countries, um, people were against the will of their government. Companies were against the will of their government, just directly polluting with a lot of this plastic, kind of using the good stuff and throwing out the bad. So circular economy kind of has a long way to go, but there are some examples I think of it happening. Um, consider like, sorry, you're gonna ask a question.
No, no, no. Go ahead. No, no, no. I was writing down a question actually.
Oh, good. So I feel like there are a few examples of this happening. Something close is like Preserve. There's a company called Preserve Products, and they use largely yogurt containers, and these plastics produced in the U.S. To make consumer goods like toothbrushes and kitchen utensils and things like that.
Hmm.
um, Now, when it comes to okay, a really good example of circular economy that's being embraced more in European countries than here is, um, using um, reusable and refillable containers. It's like there's a company called Loop, um, a project kind of company called Loop, and they use reusable containers. It's kind of like the milkman model,
Hmm.
where you leave the. I don't know if you have milkmen, or if you are familiar with the milkman model, but people would receive the milk and then leave the jars out, and milkman would take them as he brings the new product and just cycle that through. And that's possible with some consumer goods, and Loop is doing things with like ice cream, putting them in putting Haagen-Dazs ice cream in an aluminum cylinder that's like insulated, um, and keeps ice cream colder, and it looks sexier, and there's certain benefits to um, embracing the cyclical nature of packaging around a product. It's just definitely costs more, and it's going to take some time to work out that business model um, being efficient for everybody.
All right, Garrett, we're nearing an hour. I had a few last questions to ask you about what stage of business, basically, where you guys at right now? What are the biggest struggles, and what are your plans, and what are you guys working on?
Where we are as a company, we're in an interesting place because in one case, we've been working on this stuff for a couple of years now, um, on the process and learning, and another stage, we're just about to release what I feel like is our first real product, where we've had this little flower pot, and we're proud of what we're doing with it, um, but don't feel like we've really introduced something super new to the world, super useful to a community. So I think excited is mostly where we're at. Slightly disappointed that some of our plans fell through, and like engineering labs that we wanted to use are not available. But everybody's going through that right now, and like if we think that we were going to be able to get all the stuff we wanted to done in the same amount of time and release stuff and have the same amount of success, it's like we just have to embrace the process of pivoting. And so we're allowing ourselves right now more time to develop this product. We have the time, we're using it. We have, as far as connecting with people, getting the word out, or connecting with people who want to hear about us, there's no better time to do that. We have literally a captive audience, and we have captive hosts here. Excited about educating people about how to recycle better, and about how to like maybe live more peaceful lives as they're cooped up. Um, and we're working on an incense holder right now, which is kind of this random project that we picked up for ourselves. We floated the idea on Instagrams and ran a little poll, and about 25 people all said yes. We like the idea, so we're using some time to design a little incense burner and seeing how we can mold that in house and get it into production in within a couple of weeks, and we can actually sell that as well as do some giveaways and stuff. And so building community right now, and just spending time on what we're excited about.
What are the biggest struggles as a CEO? And what kind of have you experienced any epiphanies or a mind shift, especially like you say you started a few years ago, and in terms of just cannabis industry and just hemp in general, the industry is changing so rapidly. As a CEO, any tips or to be a great CEO? I guess that's what everybody's seeking.
Um, yeah, I don't know that I'm in a position to say this is how you do it. But I I feel like I've had to learn a lot more about how just individuals are different, just about how people work differently, um, and how I need to be a different leader in different contexts and with different people. Um, so that kind of contextual shift and just like being a human first with people, I think allows you to work with them in a more productive way. Um, yeah, like stuff I've realized. Um, I think that's the main thing, like shifting the way I communicate, um, so that people understand better. Um, and it's also been kind of like being myself. Like you see the way I talk most of the time, and it's largely technical and pretty grammatical and sometimes clinical. And I can be myself, and that's fine. Like I've never had to worry about that. I'm also a smoker, and like I can smoke on my Instagram, and I don't have to worry about that. And like people see the whole me, and then they know I'm being real with them when I tell them like when I tell them some truth about what's going on in recycling, or when I tell them how they can do something better, or how we're doing something. Those are the things, I suppose.
Where can they find you? What are the best links to reach out personally to you or the company?
To me, if anybody wants to reach out, I'm at Garret Garret at resinate.tech. Resinate is Resinate. And then social media. You want to see what we're up to. You want to see where our recycling bins are now, and where they'll be available in the future. New product updates, recycling education, not only for cannabis packaging recycling, but generally. Um, that's Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. Instagram and Facebook is at Resonate SM, and LinkedIn we are just called Resonate Remanufacturing.
Perfect timing. My dog just started fighting. Thank you.